Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 208, and I'm delighted to be joined on the podcast today by Elle Turner. Elle is the first team S&C Sports Science at Manchester City Women. Elle, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you for freeing up some time and coming on.
It's all right, you're welcome.
Elle, can you kick us off? I've just mentioned your current role there at City, but can you give us a little bit of a breakdown on your career so far and what's led up to that role?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate in 2013 when Man City got their license for the WSL, and they were full-time players that were involved in there, and I was part of building the team up in the background with Nick Cushion and Helen Vaughan, or Helen Sandel, she's called now. And yeah, I was working with them for the first 3 seasons. Did really, really well. We qualified for Champions League in our second season, won the Continental Cup in our first season, and then the girls went on in the third season to win the treble, which was amazing. Then I moved back into the boys full time. So I was working with the under 12s or under 16s as the youth development phase lead on in that section. And then in 2018, I went to get back into the women's game again. So there was a role that came up. One came up at Arsenal, one came up at Man United. I applied for both and got offered them both, and met Casey Stoney and was blown away by her vision and the plans that they had over at the Red Side in Manchester. And took the punt and went across there and had a brilliant 3.5 seasons with them, and then moved back to Man City then December last year. During that time, I think it was 2011 to 2016, I was doing my PhD as well on women's football, so looking at the physical and the match performances. Collected all my data in 2011 and 2012, and then was writing it up then for the next 3-4 years after that. So I've been through like the stages. A lot's changed since 2011, and when we started with City Women's in 2013, and then how it is now, like it's changed a lot.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that because I know you've had time in the boys' game, but I really want to focus on your time in the women's game because I think it's fascinating. Obviously, with the success they've had recently in terms of the England team, we're getting a lot more coverage now, which is fully deserved on Sky, and it's a lot more accessible, isn't it? And we see the difference in the game now. It's completely different, isn't it? But on your side, I thought it'd be interesting discussing from sort of that period of 2013 to now, some of the biggest changes that you've seen on the sort of physical side, the preparation side, and even as athletes as well.
I think one of the biggest things is how professional it's been. Like, obviously the girls then became full-time and were professional athletes, but a lot of them didn't know what it took to be professional. So a lot of that was like education of how to be a professional footballer, not just on the pitch, but off the pitch as well, and the importance into their strength and conditioning as well, which a lot of them hadn't had much support with unless they'd been in the international setups. But yeah, in terms of like on pitch, we've seen like the physical demands have improved and improved and improved, and even now, like the rate of improvement is not slowing down.
Yeah.
So I feel like we've only really just scratched the surface in the game with these types of players, and they've still got a lot left to come. But what's been amazing is like their attitude and their application, like right from the get-go, and how appreciative they are of the opportunity that they have to live their dream and be like full-time professional athletes.
Can you take us back to that sort of period of 2013 now? Just give a bit of a perception on what preparation was like. And I know there'll be difference because we've spoke on the phone in terms of the team. The support team now will be completely different to before. But what did that look like? What were some of the key differences back then? Like what would that preparation look like for the girls?
I think like the support staff was very, very different. So they had a coach who'd been with them for quite a few seasons before, when they were amateur. He came in, and then Nick Cushing came in from the boys' side as well, and he was leading it, like the full-time like coaching element on there. They had quite a bit of a turnover with the goalkeeping coach that they did have. They had a changeover of those coaches, and the assistant coach changed as well, which is taken a bit of time. But the physio, Helen Sandor, she was still doing a little bit of work with the boys, as well as working with the women. And I was only really supposed to work 8 hours with the women a week, which we ended up doing a lot more than that. Yeah, back then I'd work with the boys. Like, I'd get up in the morning and go to work, and I'd be with the boys until maybe 4 or 5 o'clock. Mm-hmm. There were 5 at that point when we very first started. They started with 5 full-time, like, professional players. So that was Jill Scott, Steph Horton, Karen Barsley, Tony Duggan, and Betsy Hassett. So they would come in the morning. They would train with the under-18 boys. Right. Then they would have lunch, then go home and rest. Then they would come back in the evening, and then they'd train them with the part-time players. Wow. So we had players that would be in work all day, and then they would come to the training ground then in the evening. But we were on a different site as well, where I think it was Wyatt Robinson's College, which is on it's on an AstroTurf as well outside. So how it is now, like, the girls are obviously everybody is full-time now. I think that season, towards the back end of the first season, we then came under the academy umbrella, and we had academy director called Mark Allen, and he really bought into the women's game, and he valued it so much, and he made sure, like, the girls got what they needed to be professional. Like, even little things of making sure that the girls, like, got their kit washed, even the part-time players, like, so that they weren't having to work all the time and then having to focus on washing the kit. Just like small things like that made, like, such a big difference. But he really looked after the women's team and pushed it on, and made sure that they were getting the support, but also that the girls were giving back as well, and make sure that they were hitting, like, the high standards of what's required at Manchester City.
Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting, that transition, isn't it? When you say there's just a handful of players that were professional, and the way they sort of had to blend in with the 18s boy team, because until the rest of the squad got there. It's really interesting, isn't it? It's compared to now as well. Just on that as well, Elle, going back to that time, what was it like in terms of gym work? Like, what was the exposure like for the girls in terms of working in the gym back then?
We actually used the gym at Salford Uni, down at there, that they have with. So I worked with Paul Comfort, and at that time I was still doing my PhD, and I was collecting a lot of data, so we were able to use the performance lab there and still use, like, the S&C facilities, which I don't know if you've been down there, but they were good back then, but they've expanded it as well. Yeah. So yeah, we used to go down there, and then I'd have the support of like the other students that were down there, so they got experience that way, and the players got more, like, one-to-one coaching, and we were able to build, like, some really good foundations with them at that point.
So was that the players that were full-time, or was that the whole squad? Like, how did that work?
All players. Yeah. Was it? So in the evenings, when we weren't at the college on the AstroTurf, we would be twice a week. We would do our strength training over at Salford Uni.
Yeah. So then they've still had, in terms of, like, training age and gym work, when you're looking at those players, and obviously a few of those are still playing at the highest level now, they've had a good amount of years, haven't they, of exposure to that work now?
Yeah, we try to get in, like, good habits, so making sure, like, even before they'd start training, we've got a pre-act session in place. We'd condition them as well, like, during the session. And then if we needed to do some conditioning at the end and bolt stuff onto the training that we hadn't managed to hit for whatever reason. And then they'd also get the the exposure then in the S&C sessions in the gym.
Yeah, because that's what you see, isn't it, in the game now, with it being so explosive, so quick. There's obviously a big change in terms of athletes as well, isn't there? They're very different now to going back a few years. You're looking at some real athletes now out there, aren't you?
Yeah. I don't think they're going to slow down either. I think they're just going to keep getting better and better. Even the teams that don't really have probably the financial budget to buy the best players. Yeah, you might not be able to buy the best players who are technically and tactically at the very top of their game. But what you can do is, it doesn't cost money like to train the players and train them in a certain way. So you're finding now that the teams that don't have a big budget to buy those big players, they're still like challenging the top teams because they'll outrun you, and they want to win more than what some of the big teams do.
Yeah.
And they make it very, very difficult.
Yeah. With that in mind, so we've sort of talked about the early years and taking it back to now and sort of beyond. You talked about this development, how the game is just progressively getting better all the time. We're on this upward curve at the moment, aren't we? Mm-hmm. How does that translate into what you do? Because obviously if the game's going to get quicker, and we've spoke a lot about the future of football, and there's predictions of all sorts of that people are making on the game, but what does that look like for you in terms of when you're prepping players?
We do try and stay like 3-5 steps ahead. That was one of the biggest lessons that I learned from the first season at Man City. Like, we didn't expect to qualify for Champions League in the second season. And then the following season, because it was a summer league back then, so you had to wait another season before you then went into the Champions League, like the knockout rounds and whatnot. But that's one of the biggest learning curves. And when I went and worked with Casey Stone at United, that was the very first thing that we did. Like, the best case scenario was we qualify for Champions League in our second season, because we started in the Championship. So the best case scenario would be this. We need to make sure all the players are physically ready to cope with the demands of Champions League football, of where it's going to be in like 3 years' time. Yeah. So we try and do that now. Is always try and stay like 3-5 steps ahead of the game, and don't become complacent. And you're always working towards like where it's going to be, not where it currently is now, because the game just keeps moving and evolving.
What does that look like for you in terms of attributes or points of data maybe that you're keeping an eye on? Where does your focus go to when you're looking at that sort of 3 to 5 year plan?
It's working backwards and making sure the girls are training at the right level, like on the pitch. But they're also they're getting the stuff in the gym as well to be able to cope with those demands. So, for example, if the game's going to get quicker, they're going to be doing more sprints. Like, you're going to have to make sure that the girls have like strong enough, robust hamstrings to be able to cope with those demands when it does happen in a couple of years' time.
Yeah.
So we're constantly kind of like reviewing like where we're at, where we need to go, and if we're on track. And just keep reevaluating. I'm trying to make it like individual specific to each of the players, because they're all totally different.
Yeah, definitely. You talked before as well about Champions League, and obviously that's placing demands on the players from different points in terms of extra travel, but then also playing teams from different countries and different styles, different weather conditions. There's all sorts of different factors that come into that as well. What have been some of the learnings that you've taken away from getting players into Champions League as well?
It's for them to be able to cope with like 3 games in a week, plus travel on top of that. So we're working on something really unique and special at the moment that's not been done in the women's game before. I can't really talk too much about it, but it's gonna be a game changer. But yes, that's one of the biggest kind of challenges that we have faced, where you've played a game. It's hard enough for them to get them to recover and get enough fuel into them, and you've got the recovery strategies of what you need. And when you're on the road as well, you've got to be really adaptable. So for example, at the training ground, it's great. We have we have ice baths already in there, and they're set to a specific temperature, and it's all done like automatically. But obviously when you're on the road, you don't get access to that. And if the other team have that, like, they're not going to let you they're not going to let you borrow it. So you have to be really adaptable. But I think one of the biggest lessons from like the pandemic and COVID, and how you had to be adaptable, like things that you've never even thought of, or you've never even been taught before, like it just becomes like life experience. And working with the players as well, like, because a lot of the time I found like the players have better ideas than what you do. So if you collaborate really well and you have really good working relationships with them, like, you get good buy-in, but then you also get good feedback as well of ways of how we can push things on further, because they think totally differently to what like the staff think. So it's a two-way thing.
Yeah, especially like some of the names you mentioned before who've been in the game for a number of years now, played at the highest level. They're going to have learned a lot of stuff over that time, aren't they, about their bodies and how they recover, how they can go again, and all the rest of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. In terms of you, we talked before as well about the girls getting more professional and essentially learning how to be professional athletes. Like, what was the process for that from your perspective? Was that a case of just constant communication? Was there a certain education needed around it? Or was it a bit of like a trial and error? We need to see what we need to deal with along the way.
I think we were really fortunate, like myself, Helen and Kush. We were surrounded by some very experienced people that had a lot of experience in the game, but also experience in like elite performance. So like, I've touched on like Mark Allen before, who was like the academy director, but we also had Grant Downey, who had years and years and years of experience, and we were able to learn from him. We had Matt Cook as well, who worked a long time in the Olympic setup, and then we had professional footballers that come in that had like huge amount of experience as well. We had Cherry Daly then that came in, who's had a lot of experience with England rugby and won the Women's World Cup with them. So we were really fortunate. We had I was very inexperienced and had a lot to learn. I still have a lot to learn now, but we were able to lean on these types of people and kind of listen to their stories and what worked, what didn't work, what's professional, what's not. And there was always challenges that came up, and like having them as like a bouncing board and listening to what they would do, or listening to like they'd always have like something that had happened similar to that specific moment. And like together we were able to kind of come up with like and pave a way forward. So we wouldn't have been able to do that without those staff around us.
And what was the sort of reception like from players? Was it just sort of accepted that things had to, I suppose, change and the habits had to change because this was different now, it's professional? You were basically told to either fit in or you kind of go. And look, some of them did fall away, but that's kind of part of it. Like the bus isn't waiting. Like you either get on the bus or if you need to get off, like that's fine. Like this life isn't for everybody. And like the stress and the pressure and the demands that are being put on you to kind of perform and to be a professional footballer, like if that's not for you, like that's fine. Because we understood like it wasn't for everyone, but we do our very best to kind of drag them along, and when things got a little bit tough. Did you see those standards driven by the players as well? So when you're talking about nutrition, about recovery, was that very much driven by the players to the players as well? We had like right at the beginning, it was very chalk and cheese. Like we had a very big mixture of the players. Some that would like do everything like to their knowledge and what they knew at the time. Like they did everything properly and they would leave no stone unturned. But then we would have like other players that wasn't at that level. And the players would do their best to kind of drag them along with them and to lead by example.
But for some of them, like they didn't kind of make it through.
So in terms of looking forward on how the game's progressing, has there been any changes in terms of accessibility for data, like collecting data, analysis on that side?
Yeah, from back then, we used to use GP Sports. They were the units that we used back then, and obviously that the way you collect like the GPS data now, that there's a lots of brands out there, and we currently use Stat Sports, which are brilliant, but I know there's other ones that are out there which are also very, very good. But one of the really good things now is that we get to actually see the players live and of what they're doing in the session. So for example, when I do a warm up and I'm doing max velocity, for example, it'll tell you exactly like the speed that they hit. So I always want to try and get them to hit 90% of their max speed PB, like twice a week, just to make sure that the hamstrings like are really robust, like, and we protect them. So what you don't want to do is not hit it during the training week, and then they go and do a max effort in a game, and then the hamstring goes.
Yeah.
So it's just one of many things that we are doing to make sure we keep the hamstrings as healthy as we can. But yeah, we have it live, so we can see exactly so in the warm up when I do, we end up doing sprints at the end. You can see exactly who's hit over that 90% mark and who hasn't. But it's also really good. It is, so I always read them out to the girls like aloud, and you might get some that get 102%, so they got a new PB, and like the girls are absolutely buzzing for them.
Yeah.
And then the players like proper chuff with themselves, which is really nice. But another good thing is that at the end of the session, you can see if you've actually hit the physical qualities that you set out at the start. So say you needed to hit a certain amount of high speed running, or certain sprint distance or whatnot, you can actually see, like, as the session's going on, if you're hitting it, if the drill's supposed to achieve the physical outcome of what you kind of planned and intended it to do. But also if you have players that are a bit work shy, you can actually see like whether they've actually putting it in or not. And there's nowhere to hide within that, which like in the past when we first started, I'd have to get the units, download them all in the office, and then then you're like, oh god, like this player didn't get it. Whereas now, like we don't have that issue. We can solve it right in the moment, and we're not chasing everything then for the rest of the week, and then closer to the game as well, and putting more load on them just to kind of chase numbers and whatnot. We can kind of hit it in the moment.
It's a lot more seamless, isn't it? And also efficient in terms of time as well, because it's there and then, isn't it? So if you need to act on whether it's adapting a session, adapting a drill, or like you say, putting something extra in for certain players, it's there and then, isn't it? Rather than waiting for that feedback in an hour's time or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, definitely. We use it as well for match days. So if a player's been on and they've played 15 minutes, for example, like we'll then know exactly what to do then in the top ups at the end. Each of them have like a target that they need to achieve.
Yeah.
So that's one of the biggest ones as well, what we've been able to use it for. Or if there's players coming back from injuries and we've set certain kind of guidelines, then we've always got that there as well, that so we can kind of adjust as we go, rather than going, right, this player's playing this amount of minutes and then that's it. Like if it's an easier game physically, we might be able to push things on a little bit further, which the coaches really appreciate.
Brilliant. Elle, some great information in there. If it's good with you, we'll move on to our quick fire questions at the end of the podcast, which need a different name. I always say they need a different name because they're not quick questions.
Okay.
But anyway, who have been some of the biggest influences on your career so far?
Probably Grant Downey and Matt Cook. Do you need me to go into detail?
You can expand on that. I'm sure a lot of people, well, Grant's been on the podcast.
Oh, nice.
A fair while ago now, actually. He needs to get Grant back on, but yeah, I'm sure some people have heard of Grant. But yeah, if you could expand, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think both of them at the time of my career, like, I needed a break. Like, I was kind of struggling to kind of get my foot in the door, and like I was working so hard. Like, I was doing my PhD and doing 4 jobs at the same time. Like 2 of them weren't even related to football at all. So yeah, they kind of give me a chance, and they worked really hard with me. Like, Grant worked with me on like my communication and like my human side, like how to connect with people, and like how to coach, but like still living by my values and what they stood for. So he did a lot with me as a person to firstly understand my values and what I was about, and like how I wanted to kind of what I wanted to be known for, and what I wanted to stand for, and whatnot. And like, he was a brilliant mentor with me, like from day one until the day that he retired. And then on the flip side, and then I'd Matt Cook, who was like ridiculous attention to detail, and I had a lot of things. I still have a lot of things to work on, but I had a hell of a lot more to work on back then. And like, he would get up and meet me at 6 a.m. in the morning, like, and do and upskill me and spend a lot of time with me and on my coaching and my delivery and my coaching points and my cues. And like, he really went out of his way, like, to help me with that, and made me have a real attention to detail, to data, and the analysis and how to get that across. And he was brilliant. So I was really fortunate that I had both of those influences at that same time.
Whether they're official or unofficial, that's essentially what mentors are, isn't it? The people there that give you that chance, give you that support like that. And I think that the other thing you touched on there, Elle, is the importance of having people that can cover different skills as well. Like you just mentioned about Grant covering more the sort of, whether you call them soft skills, or however you want to phrase it, Matt focusing more on the actual applied sort of practice side of things. Like, it's really important to have people that fit into those different areas as well, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And then being like, as I kind of went through the years, and like being aware of like the areas that you've got gaps in, and like learning from whoever it is, and being more aware of your surroundings and the people around you, and how you can, like, I'm a big believer, like, everyone you meet like knows something that you don't. Like, whether that's the cleaner, whether that's the receptionist, whether that's the CEO or the academy director, like there's always something that you can learn from these people. And we've been really fortunate, like, to have like a great group of people.
Yeah, brilliant. Elle, what would you say your biggest strength is as a practitioner?
I think as a practitioner now, probably like my adaptability. Like, I think I was quite regimented at the start of my career, like 1 + 1 = 2, and then that's it. But I think working with certain athletes, and they've really tested me, and I've now realized that there's other ways to get to an outcome. And it's just been like really adaptable to that person, and trying to get buy-in from the player and build a relationship with them. And like, I don't think that used to be one of my weaknesses, but I feel like now, like, I've worked on it so much that it actually helps me with my coaching element now, and how I program things, and like, I can be more individualized to them, because I connect with them better as a person, because I meet them more now, like more than halfway, like to get that connection with them and to learn a lot more about them. Whereas before, like, I was very private and wouldn't give anything away. But I've learned, like, if you open up, like, the player will open up as well. And then once they've opened up, you then learn more about what makes them tick, and how they function as a person as well as an athlete. because you can come up with the best program in the world, but if you don't get buy-in with that player, like there's no point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine a lot of people, especially younger coaches, will struggle with that exact point. Coming out of university or coming off the back of courses or whatever, essentially you've got the knowledge there to do the majority of the job. But like you said, having that sort of experience, that exposure to players and knowing how to work with them is a very different thing, isn't it? I think you've already answered this, but if people are in that scenario and they're just sort of banging their heads against the wall, they can't get the message through to players, or they can't seem to build this relationship, what would be your top bit of advice? I know you've gone through a little bit there.
Like use the people around you, like because they probably had experience with a similar type of player and similar type of person.
Yeah.
I think like being patient. I'm working at the moment with FIFA on a women's physical performance program. It's like a mentor program. So we've been supporting like the Oceania regions for the last like maybe 17, 18 months now, before their OFC Cup that happened in July. And there's some absolutely outstanding like practitioners on that are leading the program, but also the mentors as well. And we've been able to share like different ideas and whatnot and bounce things off each other. But there's also been workshops, and we had a workshop from Carl Lines, and he was big on like. So we've been working with one of the member associations, so one of the countries, and it's over Zoom like this. So you're having to build like rapport and relationship and trust, like over a computer screen. Yeah. So he gave us a lot of information, and they coached us a lot, like to help upskill us in this area. And said like one of the biggest like bits of advice was don't go in and start changing stuff and start going, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. First thing first is go in and build the trust, build the relationship, like, and build the foundation, and then you can start then like pulling stuff in. Or what about this? What about this? So that worked really, really well. But then I think also, like, say for example, I'm struggling with a player, and it might be that one of the coaches, like Alaman or Gaz Taylor, might have a better relationship with that player. So the information or the session of what you're trying to get across is best delivered and led by that particular staff member. Yeah. So, and it's just parking your ego and going, well, as long as the outcome gets done at the end, it doesn't matter how we get there and who does it. It's going to be for the good of the team. Great advice. I'm glad you expanded on that, because you give some absolute gold there. That was really good. The other question I normally ask is, if you were to go back a few years now, if you go sort of pre-2013, what would be your top bit of advice for you? Career advice. Say that again, sorry. What would be the top bit of advice for a younger Elle? Is like not to worry too much, that it'll all work out. That probably the main thing. And there's no rush. Like, enjoy the process. You don't have to get there as fast as you can, and kind of cut corners. I don't mean cut corners as in cut corners with your work. I mean like cut corners as in like not looking after yourself, like your mental and your physical well-being, and the time, like what keeps you healthy, like spending time with your friends and your family, like not cutting those types of corners, which I guess it's something that I'm still working on now, and still trying to get this bit right. Yeah, brilliant. And then just finally, Elle, I always ask about CPD, and I know you've mentioned the group there that you're working with FIFA. So I'm sure there's plenty of learning opportunities there. But what's your general approach to CPD now? Is it conversations? Is it podcasts, articles, research? How do you go about continually improving? I really, really like learning from other sports and from other industries. I think the game can learn a lot from either like different coaches in different environments, or different leadership roles within different like businesses and corporations. So I really enjoy like going to like different places or reading like the books about them and whatnot. So before the pandemic, like Man United they were going to support me to go over to spend some time with Cirque du Soleil, and awesome. over in Las Vegas, and then go and spend some time at Altis in Arizona. And obviously like it didn't happen because everything was still in lockdown and there was no travel at that point that summer. But like going to those types of places and those types of people, and I think they're absolute gems. You can learn so much about them. Because again, like you're going in there and it's a different skill set, but it's totally different people, and totally different like pressures and risk. Yeah, brilliant.
Elle, that's been absolutely class. Thank you very much for doing
Thank
it.
you.
I really appreciate you coming on. If people have got questions, if they want to reach out to you, is there anywhere that you direct them?
Probably Instagram. Get me more on them. I've still not worked out how to use LinkedIn. My friend Rob Martin's supposed to be giving me like an education on it, but it's just getting time.
So maybe not LinkedIn for now. Maybe stick to Instagram for now.
Yeah, so if anyone's messaged me on LinkedIn, then they've not got back to them. I'm not being rude. I just don't know how to use it.
Brilliant. Well, Elle, thank you very much, and all the best for the rest of the season.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Ben. Thank you.